Hello, everybody, and welcome to Top Tier Tier's belated cast on No Game No Life. You might have noticed we're jumping in a lot of random directions. I don't know whether or not this is actually going to get uploaded ASAP, but if it is, then it's going to have been uploaded before we've even finished Madoka, and after, No, before we've done a bunch of other sets that we really should have done prior, and that's because of all the people that were getting on the cast, we've been trialing out a new system where we just do whatever casts we can at the earliest opportunities. And this is the first candidate for that experiment. And with us, I have Tim Tom, the guy who doesn't upload videos,
Hello.
and we have Mr. Pattywagon, a
Long
guy who
time
says
lurker,
"Yo,
first time caster.
first time, is it?"
Yes.
Okay, sure.
It's the
He
first
has
time.
successfully dodged every opportunity to be on a
He
cast until
says
now.
he's Texan, so he says "y'all" a lot, and I
He,
I had to struggle not to laugh the first time he did it.
Well, thank y'all for having me on. Uh,
And he's so polite too. It's so nice.
am I
Uh,
eager to talk about the set? I am not sure. Uh, that I guess is the content of this cast, whether I'm happy about the set or not.
okay. I'm very confused, and I opened up the No Game No Life set review.
okay.
You do the intro. I've got to find my invite.
Alright. Welcome to Top 2 start with the Franxx set review. I'd like to acknowledge some sites and resources that we use to make these casts possible, namely the slideshow content. So thank you to you, Tay, Little Occupant, and Heart of the Cards. Thank you very much. Our letter grades are the same. We're sticking with the same system we have been trialing out. Same plus minus, same A, B, C, D, F. Do you want me to go over the grades again, or?
They can probably do it by themselves if we've got the slides linked in the
Sure.
description.
Okay.
But basically, A is good, F is bad.
Yes, and
And
it's like a
all the in-betweens are,
sliding
yeah.
scale basically, and we have some like general grades we give to certain profiles, but we'll cover that later as they come up. Uh, as always, we have a common terms glossary for you people who are maybe newer to the game, don't know some of the vernacular we might use in discussion. Use this as your guide to follow along as you watch the video. And I think that's it. We're going to start with yellow. Um,
Yeah, once my Google
oops.
Slides loads. Yeah, so we haven't really got a consensus on where we start, but this is as good a place as any because it is probably the premier level 1 combo for the set. This is 02, the Fated Start. This is what we call a Minami profile. So it's a climax combo with a shot climax when the battle opponent is reversed. If you have the shot climax in your climax zone, look it up the 4 cards from the top of your deck, add 1 character with either Parasite or Franxx into your hand.
Uh, Reveal it, put it into your hand, and then choose another character, and that character gains 2k power for the turn. Uh, Hello?
Okay, so I'm cutting out.
Uh,
Yep.
I think this combo is fine. Not much else. Not much to say about it that hasn't already been said a lot. But I mean, it'll attack at 7k power. It's like literally the Minami, literally the original Minami from Cinderella Girls. And that combo's fine. This combo's fine. Attacks at a decent level. Will snowball in power as you proceed through the battle phase and get reverses. Uh, the profile might be slightly better now, as people have been alluding to. Some metas have become more friendly to lower powered on reverse combos, and this card would certainly benefit from such a meta scenario. Do you have any thoughts, Mr. Pattywagon?
Uh, I think it's funny that we open with calling it the premier level 1 combo,
Yeah.
and then
Well.
Tom calls it fine. But that's also just true. Both things are true.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know what the level 1 combos are yet. So
Um,
if it
There
is
are
if it is the
some
premier level 1
stinkers.
combo, then I apologize.
no,
There are definitely some stinkers.
it basically is. Uh, it's obviously open to counterplay, but in a lot of metas, the counterplay doesn't exist. That they won't be able to get big enough. Um,
It also gets
you
quite large because some of your preferred supports pump for fairly large amounts of power.
Punishes stragglers. Like if your opponent can't reliably put up 3 good lanes on defense, it'll punish uh, easy reverses given by utility cards or just cards that are just super weak on offense.
and a lot of the level zeros, which you're encouraged to play multiple copies of to enable your trance and mid game and end game supply power in different kinds of ways. So even if they try to make big lanes, you can hopefully climb over them and wipe the board. Like
Yeah.
not big lanes, but medium-sized lanes.
So am
I think this is a B according to the rating system. It's not
Can you guys hear
actually
me?
excellent.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
Did I just cut out for a while, or?
You might have cut
You
out.
managed to tell us that the Manami combo checks 4 and adds 1, but it we didn't hear that it got power on play, which I think is on and typically better that it's big without needing the combo for.
No, it doesn't get power in play. It only gets power when you play climax.
It's when you play a climax, so it is repeatable for whatever that's worth. But it's fine. Um, I think that's the best way to sum it up.
Cool.
Oh, did I actually write it down wrong in my?
Yeah, now it forces you to pay attention to the slides. Feel my pain.
All right. Gonna put down your grade or let's
It
move
doesn't
this.
look like there's a typing reticle, but when you click the box, you can type.
Okay.
Well,
I presume. Yeah, there you go. You're in purple. Okay, the next card. Miku, Naive and Romantic. This is level 3. It's a finisher, and it also has a very interesting utility effect. So the finisher effect is up to once a turn when this is placed from hand to stage. When damage dealt by this is cancelled, you may deal 1 to your opponent. And then it has, when this is placed from hand to stage, you may ditch a card from your hand. If you do, both players, or all players I suppose, reshuffle all their waiting rooms to their decks and shuffle those decks. So it is a forced mutual free fresh, which comes with a quote, it comes with a finisher of sorts. What do you guys think about this?
It's a pretty
Mutual-
situational effect. Situational effect, I think, as far as efficacy.
Yeah. It's a very powerful effect, but the fact that you can only use it at level 3,
Yeah.
this kind of
I
effect
mean,
is situationally very powerful.
is this
but
the first time it's appeared in a level 3?
you could count the kiss shot from Monogatari.
Oh, but that's different because
it's
they
different
actually
than you
just
don't take.
refresh. Yeah, they take refresh
Yes.
point.
But in terms of
Game impact, sure.
Overall-
Like the
overall effect it is.
compression play, right? It's the same kind of thing, I guess.
as Tom said, because it's situational, you'd want to be able to play it for a longer duration of the game than just a level 3 turn, because your opening to abuse it might appear at level 2, not at level 3.
Right, and we use this card to basically make our opponent's compression a lot worse.
Yes,
Or
or
make ours
occasionally
a
make
lot
your
better.
compression. Yes.
Yeah,
occasionally make
or
your
yeah,
compression better.
and sometimes it'll be a heal on either side, depending.
It can, yes, because you won't be taking refresh damage. I've gone on record saying this effect is very strong, but most cards which give this effect are either not good, like either they're events which take up a card in your hand and don't pay you back for it, or they have very weird timing. So this one has a very frustrating timing in that you don't get to use it at like level 1 when it might be very powerful, or more likely at level 2 when the opponent's just played a bunch of early plays. That would be one of the best times to use an effect like this. On the other hand, when this effect is tied to a card, which is also just a fine card, like Lucky Beast in Kimono Friends, for example, it's just a 1/0 beater, or this card, which is a 3/2 with a finisher effect tacked on, I tend to view it as pretty much nothing but upside. It's just there on the card. What really matters is whether or not you value the cancel burn effect. Because I think a lot of the time, it's not actually going to be clearly beneficial for you to refresh both players, whereas the cancel burn is just a fine effect to have on anything. Not a super powerful effect by any stretch of the imagination, but certainly one I'm fine having as an as a what's the word, auxiliary finisher, as a additional finisher, and on top of your main finishing combo slash finishers. I do think that people are going to read this ability and probably overrate it a little, and I'm about to be guilty of that myself because I'm going to call it a B minus.
Wow.
But I do think that having this card in your deck is totally fine if you've got yellow already, because there's not really a drawback to having the access to this effect, and it's not like the baseline of this card is really bad at any point.
I really love this effect. I'm staring at 2 SPs of this effect, because how could I not get the SP version of this card? Not only is it much better looking than the normal art, but I love Lucky Beast and Kimono Friends. However, I think this card is kind of mediocre. I think it's only okay. I think the fact that you can't play it until level 3 makes it very bad. To actually utilize the mutual refresh effect, and the cancel burn is just an okay floor. And yet, I'm also just giving it a B minus.
Because I just think the floor is fine.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, the floor is actually going to be a slight bump in your favor, and that's perfectly reasonable.
I'd probably give it a B minus even if it didn't have cancel burn.
Oh, that's
I'm
a
making
strong
this
statement.
evaluation. I'm making this evaluation just because I respect the free fish effect a lot. The cancel burn, I'm not respecting a lot.
But I think I respect the free fresh effect in context. Normally, I think it's usually just a wash. On average, it's not going to really help or hinder significantly. But no, I respect that. I've seen that effect crush people enough to have a respect for it. Okay, next card. You've got to type in your rating, by the way.
I gotta get used to this. My bad. Okay, there it is.
Access to this is yeah, everyone gets to see these ratings. So there's a record of us being horribly wrong or horribly right. Right, next card, Zoromir, Argentea's Stamen. Your other character in the front row center slot gains 500 power, and when you play a climax, you may clock the top card of your library. If you do, look up 4 cards from the top of your deck, add up to 1 Parasite, Franxx, or Adult trait, reveal it, add it to your hand, and put the rest in your waiting. This is a fabulously powerful effect, just no stock used, straight up plus, which already makes any climax a cantrip, if a cantrip being making the climax replace themselves at no stock cost, which historically has been extremely powerful, and I think it will be similarly powerful here. Before I talk about why I have issues including this card, do you guys have any contributions? What do you guys think about it?
Notably, it's a lot worse after level 1, but obviously very fantastic at level 0 and level 1 compared to like the regular Amagi profile, which costs the stock rather than forcing you to clock the top card of your deck.
I agree that as a card, it's worth looking at when deck building, even without thinking about the trance.
Yeah, I don't.
Which we haven't mentioned.
We'll talk about the trance as soon as we hit Argentea, which I think, or as soon as we hit the Trancer, which comes before Argentea, if I recall correctly.
Yes.
Um, but this card, like everyone said, is really powerful at level 0. It means that you can feasibly just slam extra climaxes at level 0, get a couple extra soul, and cantrip, which effectively gives you extra attacks at level 0.
This scales
And it
really well in
accelerates you.
multiples too. Since there's no stock
Yes, it
cost,
does.
you
So,
get like you can get a lot of pluses just where a regular Amagi would not get you as many. Like for as many copies as you draw at level 0, you could probably
yes,
just get a plus for every single
because
copy. Whereas with
because
Amagi, you need to you need to get the stock. So
yeah, you don't need to build up a resource before you can use this, and that's actually really powerful. The problem with this card is actually space. Um,
it's a transcend.
unless, yeah, unless you're using these specific trance, you're gonna have a lot of level zeros fighting for room. You are basically not able to go into 3 or 4 color without a lot of sacrifices. And this card, unfortunately, is not tied to one of the better trance pairs. While it itself is arguably the best trance fodder, you can make an argument for other cards, but I think this one might be the best. The card it turns into is not particularly strong as a trance target. So this ends up being tacked on as like a 2 or 3 of in a lot of my lists. And then I look again and find out that the plussing level 0 of choice is also in yellow. So it's very hard to justify running too many yellow level 0s when there are some pretty heavy color requirements if you want to get creative with this set. Now, if your only color requirements are yellow and red or, yellow and blue, then you can feel free to do whatever. But since most of the decks I've tried to build end up yellow-red, and most of the ones I've seen online are also yellow-red, this card can be slotted in. It's not a hard commitment. Even then, it's really hard to fit it in because there are a lot of good level zeros in this set, even ignoring the trance stuff. Like there are blue level zeros you want to play, there are yellow level zeros other than this you want to play, and then there's your trances, and then there's discard outs, and it gets to the point where this card becomes an afterthought, and I end up cutting all but 2 from one of my more brainstormed lists. What about you guys? Have you built any decks with this, or
Nope.
sounds about right?
I think what you said about slots was my biggest problem with the card. I love playing climaxes at 0 on a tri lane. I I cut my teeth on that. I grew up on that. But I agree it was hard to justify putting in uh, this card.
You also need to run quite a few copies of this card for it to be truly impactful. My stance on cards like this, where you have to clock yourself to gain advantage, is that you want to draw these as soon as possible, so you get the best benefit out of the potential pluses this card can give you, because this is also just not a very strong card on offense. So
I'm sticking with B though because I think that if you wanted to, this card could basically carry your early game. And there is a world
yes.
where you don't even run the level 1 combo, but I'm not sure if that world is one I want to live in. Um, yeah, so we'll just move on, I guess.
Sure.
Okay, so this is a less exciting card. Miku, first time at the beach, another shot combo. When this attacks, if you have a different shot in the climax zone, you have 5 or fewer cards in stock. Look at up to 3 cards from the top of your deck, add up to 1 character with either Parasite or Franxx to your
Well,
hand, and put the rest in your waiting room.
this almost just feels like a worse version of the card before in a lot of ways.
Kind of. I
Kind of.
mean,
I mean, it's
the idea is
free.
to play them together, right?
Y- I
You
guess.
can you can play 8 copies of this card.
Wow.
Yeah, you can go nuts early on by just
Sure.
slamming climax. Of course, the chance of you drawing into that climax that early, as well as several copies of these zeros, is not particularly high. Like not appreciably high. It'll happen sometimes, But even when that does happen, you get an aggressive start. It's not that much better than other decks' aggressive starts, and you're probably catapulting them to level 1 first, so they get to farm the level 0s that you've left in the front row. And at that point,
It's also a lot of slots like
yeah,
devoted to this strong
I mean
opener.
this would effectively take the level 1 combo space though,
That's
because
correct.
this is not on reverse. This is just a continuing combo, and it just sustains itself, kind of like Little Buster's style, and just rushes down. But obviously, the climax is not quite as impactful in the first deck, and you need it earlier if you really want the effect to be good, because otherwise you're running in with 2,500 power cards. Your opponent's going to get even more advantage, and trust you me, I've played a lot of LB. Knocking things out with LB actually does impact the game plan. This is never going to have that much of an effect on your opponent's board, because it's like 3,500 power, 4,000 power, sure, let's be charitable, and that's not a lot of power.
Hmm. It
Um,
just turns out in the pace of the game, the time that it takes you to find multiple copies of a climax combo happens to line up pretty well with hitting level 1. And so when you're comparing this and maybe uh, the Manami just offers greater reward for the timing at which
more
players typically
consistent
find multiple
reward, I
copies.
think. I think more consistent might be the way to put it. Um, because whereas with the Minami, you can't always guarantee each copy is going to go off because your opponent might not field enough reverse targets. This card's always going to go off, so it'll more consistently get the combo. But the Minami is also going to kill things, which is not
Hmm.
insignificant.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yes, it's killing things turns out is significant in this game, and being big on offense does matter.
Look, there
So.
is a there is a rush there is a rush style of deck which you can play with this. The limiting factor to those decks is always the climax, and this deck doesn't have anything like the Saikano check top 3 card or anything like that. So I'm loath to give it a particularly high rating. So yeah, I'll go with C minus. I'm not huge on this card, but I could see it beating faces. All right, next card is Zorome Admiration for Adults. It is a 2/5 mill runner, so at the start of your opponent's attack phase, you can mill the top card of your deck. If it's a Parasite, Franxx, or Adult, you may run to any empty slot in the front row. It's a typical mill runner. You don't really run any events in, well, that's not true. There are some events you can run in Franxx, including one particularly decent 1-0 event, but other than that, everything in your deck is a hit. And as a result, this will be a plus something like probably 80,
80% of the time.
85% of the time. And that's enough to get a B plus from me. That's what I usually give these 4Ks and runners, simply because it is a powerful effect. You're very happy to have this in your first hand. It enables tri-fields if that's what you wish to do. Um, but with Franxx, I think you need all the cards you can get, so it might not be the optimal play every single time. Okay, next card. This is the Transfer or the Merger, as per I don't know, probably part of the cards. Miku, Argentia's pistol. When you place this from hand to stage, you may choose up to 2 Argentea in your waiting room and put them on the bottom of your deck. And you can merge by putting the 0/0 Zorome, the Clock Amagi that we talked about first, under this as a marker. If you do, search your deck for up to 1 Argentea, so take it from the bottom of your deck, put it in the slot this card was in, and then put this card and the Zorome under it as markers. Then shuffle your deck. Um, so the thing with trances is they've historically only been good when you can replace the cards that you use to trance. Because you're effectively fusing 2 cards into one to get a stronger card. In anime, that works because once you have one really strong card, it just kills everything. But in the world of card games, that's not really how it works. Each card is still worth a card in the hand, and therefore trancing is always going to be a neg 1. You're sacrificing 2 cards in order to get 1. It's like a tribute summon, I suppose. And as a result, these level 3s need to replace your hand in some way, or you need some other way to continually replenish your hand. Hina Logic was successful because it had an overpowered alarm that does that. Gurren Lagann can do that because its level 3 is a come-and-play cantrip. Argentea is technically a come-and-play cantrip, but it is not a particularly good sort of cantrip. That being said, you don't have to run this in a deck that runs both Argentea and Zorome, I think. You can actually run Zorome, you can run Argentea, and then not run this Mukyu. I think that's totally appropriate, and actually might be one of the better ways to run the Knight's Claw combo. Do you guys have any thoughts on any of this? Interesting.
I think my thoughts on this card is probably very innately tied to how good Argentea is. I might just go back and grade this. Like, if Argentea is good, this is probably like, same grade as Argentea. It's probably going to be the same grade as Argentea, I guess.
So, I think Argentea is a lot better than this card. And I don't think this card is integral to Argentea's function. So I'm going to give it a D for now. And I'm probably going to give Argentea a higher grade.
Okay.
Because it's a reasonably consistent finisher. But I don't think you need to play this in order to play the other two cards. You can come back to this later, but that's my thoughts on it. What about you, Pattywagon? Do you
that goes
have any...
for me. I've given the provisional grade of C-, and I guess I'll explain that grade when we get to
Argentea. No problem. Okay, next card is a 2-1-0-2 counter. It is an anti-change counter, and the cost to anti-change is use the backup and then discard an additional 2 cards from your hand. This has historically been one of the worst costs on an anti-change counter, and has always been one people have begrudgingly played at best. I have more experience than most, having played Telavru Aliens and having played Konosuba, both who have this profile, and look, it gets the job done.
Dude, we play decks with this profile too, come on, man.
I'm sure you do, but how many?
I've shredded my hand with Fate Stay Night's level 1 counter many
Sunshine?
times.
Come on, Mono friends.
I don't think I've won games when I've paid that cost in Fate.
I have, when I play Sunshine.
Alright.
But, I mean, so the reason why it works in Sunshine, it's like, this cost is like very specifically for certain types of decks. And Sunshine is one of those types of decks where the hand just doesn't really matter after a certain point because your plays are so efficient.
You also have, in Kimono and Sunshine, for example, you've got cards that you can throw away, and they'll just sometimes come back to your hand.
Yes. I mean, but most of your value, at the points where you're aiming to look to use this effect, it's all field-based, so, like, the cards in your hand are typically just going to be, like, bad.
The thing is, in this set, I foresee that a lot of your value will be field-based, but I also foresee that you're going to want cards in hand simply because
level 3s?
in order to,
Sure.
Well, your level 3, like if say Strozia is your level 2 game, you're going to want more Strozias than just the ones you trance into.
Of course.
Trancing is
a trance. Yeah, I mean, being a trance set means your hand can be a pretty good resource for future trances.
Mm-hmm.
And this card's cost is obviously prohibitive for that kind of gameplay.
This card gets the job done. Like, if you can get rid of whatever's in your trance targets, you're gonna dominate the field.
Right, and the trade-off for this is that you can get like a plus if you defend the lane that's being attacked with this counter, and then anti-change some other level 3 in another lane. You can go basically 2 for 1, or like the counter itself goes 2 for 1.
It's a 2 for 3. Yeah.
Well, I mean, ignoring
it's a 3 for 2.
Yes, but
if you think of like your double trance as a 4-card investment, then you're trading 3 cards in your hand to preserve 4 cards invested onto the field.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's still not a great investment because that means 7 cards from your hand have all gone.
That field better be good.
Yeah.
Like, what you say sounds good, but the implication is that you were about to trance twice on the next turn? Like, I'm not sure that's what you were going to do, buddy.
Well, the
I
field that
do.
you're protecting, if you've invested 4 cards into your field, the 2 trances, like, because each trance takes
Yeah,
two
but
cards of value, and then you use
sure, but
three
that
cards in
doesn't
your
mean
hand to
you should
protect it.
sink more cost into it. Like, that's sunk cost fallacy, isn't it?
Yes. Well, if those cards on field represent a continuing value of that much in the future, then that evaluation works. But it's fair to be skeptical that the trance cards actually continue to represent like good value on field.
I
That's
mean,
fine.
what you're saying is contingent on them being so good that you would willingly pay the cost
Yes.
again the next turn. But I'm not sure that's entirely the case because the value of the cards comes from not having to invest further cards. So if you have to invest a bunch more cards to protect the cards that already took a bunch of cards, well, let's just say you're going to walk away with no cards in hand. Either way, I think this does the job. I don't think it's anything special, and I can totally see just using the counter 2500 as much or more than the anti-change backup. But even then, that's fine. Like that's a fine baseline to have, and I think we can pretty easily give this a standard C grade.
Oh, and I'll note that some decks play high counts of pants climaxes and bar climaxes. There can be builds that play with many climaxes that go to hand, and this is, you could ditch them back into refresh. That'll happen sometimes.
Speaking of climaxes going to hand, the next card, Argentea. When this is placed from hand to stage or via merge from hand to from deck to stage, choose up to one Night Claw in the waiting room, which is a climax, the wind climax, and add it to your hand. Then this gains 1k power for the turn. Not that I would necessarily advise keeping Night Claw to ditch with the 2-1, but it might be on the cards. Up to once a turn at the end of this card's attack, so whether or not it is reversed or not reversed is irrelevant. Just at the end of this card's attack, you may pay 1, ditch 2 cards from your hand, and then put Nightclaw from your climax zone to the waiting room. So you can't activate this with further copies of Argentea. If you do, stand this card.
That's a very reasonable cost to pay for another instance of damage.
It is a fine cost to pay,
Yes.
but the question is, can this deck pay the cost? If you don't spend too many resources trancing, I think that answer is a resounding yes. And I think it's a very consistent finishing cost as well. Especially because one of the other finishers you might pair with this is very stock intensive while not being very hand intensive. I'm talking about the red level 302. But
I don't like
either
that you
way,
can't use multiples of this.
well, yeah, that's a fair point. I think that if this was like, I don't know how you cost it otherwise, really. I don't know the exact stock equivalents or whatever, but
You probably have to add some other requirement instead of a climax requirement, like something like the Eris, for example.
Some
basically
RNG.
you're
Yeah.
going to want you're going to want other finishes. Now, one thing that's kind of cool about this is that um you can choose not to ditch the climax if you want the extra soul uh on say your next Argentea, which gets to attack. Or you can choose to ditch it if you think that you just want lower damage counts from your other finishers, or if you want to ping them with 1 damage. So there's some soul modulation there, which
When you
is
say
kind of cool.
ditch, you're not referring to the hand. You're talking about the climax that's in play.
Yes, I'm aware.
Oh, okay.
I mean that's what I mean because it's a continuous climax. So
Right.
if you get rid
Well,
of it, then everything suddenly loses
I
one
might be
soul.
misreading the card, but the sacking the climax that's in the climax zone is part of the cost, right? It's not part of like
No,
an
no,
optional
he's
effect.
saying in the case where you have multiple Argenteas on the board.
Um,
So if you'd rather attack with another 3 instead of restanding right now, then you can do that. Or you can restand right now and have an Argentea attack for 2 if you play multiple ones down.
I see. So you'd be trancing multiple times, but not actually like
Or just
trying to
playing
restand
Or
those
multiple
you
double
just
times.
3.
play.
You just play the
Okay.
cards double
Yeah.
3, and then you play like a 0-2 or the level 3 Miku we talked about earlier. So you like attack with Miku first, and then attack with Argentea, and then depending on the outcome of that attack, you can choose to either neglect to restand and let the next Argentea attack, or you can restand in order to have a two attack, um, two soul attacker after the restand.
Sure.
Yeah, so it's a bit roundabout, but you can modulate soul a little bit that way. I do think this is limited by the fact you can only have one Argentea restand per turn. But the fact that it gets its own climax is not to be underestimated. Like, the Miku from Cinderella Girls was not a particularly fearsome combo, and the same goes for Power of Smile Rin. But because those cards always basically got their combo, they terrorized the Japanese competitive scene for a while, and I've learned not to underestimate that consistency. I'm gonna give this a C plus on that alone, and because I believe that the other finishers in this set can pick up some slack.
I think
Okay.
because you don't get a lot of value out of multiples on field, the entire trans package is pretty suspect. And I imagine that a lot of the time, like you were saying, Alf, you wouldn't even bother playing the actual level 2 trance, and you might end up playing
Yeah.
only this.
Yeah, that's the conclusion I came to when I was messing with decks. But disclaimer, I have not tested this. It is merely conjecture. Okay, next card is 02 Emotional Explosion. It is a 00500 power. It is a stock bomb, so when it is reversed, if the battle opponent is level 0 or lower, you may put that character in the top of the opponent's stock. If so, put the bottom card of their stock in the waiting room. This is like a no game, no life counter, because memes. And when you play it from hand to stage, you may discard a present for you from your hand. So that's a 1-0 nil event, if I'm not mistaken. If you do, choose a character in your opponent's front row. That character gains neg 4k for the turn. So,
We've
This
seen
is the kind of
this
card that
before.
some people would really like.
we've seen this before in
There's
Rewrite,
yeah,
but
the
it's not
Lucha.
quite the same. So
Well,
we have well, it's not quite the same purely because of a very specific other common card that supports that
I
card.
mean, okay. Well, the thing is, that card isn't even playable in rewrite, even with that card.
Japan disagrees, but I agree with you. So there's that.
But which I
Um,
think speaks
so
to the potential playability of this card. I
uh,
think.
so yes, I agree. In addition, let's compare this. The support cards rather for present for you. That you have a ditch searcher, so you can ditch a card from your hand to, I think, ditch a character maybe, I forget, to search the event from deck, versus the Lucia Clock Bond, which is one of the most powerful commons printed in probably the history of Weiss. Uh, the difference is night and day. And this card, being a functionally identical to the Lucia Clock Bomb, which is, like Tom said, unplayable even with the incredibly powerful support that it has, means that this card is likewise pretty unplayable. If you have a
Uh,
desperate need for stock bombs, then this does serve your needs.
there's a cute plus for present for you. Um,
Isn't it costed?
it is it costs one stock. Yes,
Yeah, it's
and
not
it
great.
rests two characters. But uh, yeah, I don't think the minus 4K. It's like you'd have to go one for one, or get some enormous value off that neg power
Yes.
for this to be worth it.
Yeah, man.
Like
If you're facing
it's
down,
it would have to
just do
be. I'm trying to think of like what would be a quote like
two
good
You'd have to
commands.
value.
you'd have to get a huge reward off dismantling an opponent's board that they really need to stay alive. So if you're against something like Milky and they put the salvager in the front row that can assign extra power or something, that would
There we
be
go.
a matchup where this card like becomes actually good.
Unless they psych you out and put it in the center.
I mean,
That'd be a pretty good play.
as kimono players, what happens when you have two commands out and neither do anything because of this card?
Sure. I mean, there's that too. But like that's so situational and so specific to a meta, and it's like specific to decks that people play.
So as
But
a
the
stock
field,
bomb, this gets a D from me. But in the present package and for certain matchups, this gets better. I think there's a certain kind of person that loves this kind of card, though. But
Right.
they see this and their eyes light up. And they think, wow, this is
Interaction.
amazing. I can kill my opponent's cards. I can stock bomb their zeros. They think this is everything that they think is good about Weist Me, and that. But I'm not that high on that card.
Unfortunately, you get way less benefit typically from killing your opponent's cards like this, especially if they're in the front row.
Yes.
Because you usually just reverse them anyways, you know. So
let's talk about a slightly more interesting card then. Next one, which is Dr. Franxx.
Doctor.
Yeah, it's Dr. Franxx. When it is placed from hand to stage, you may discard a climax card. If you do, choose one of your opponent's characters, send it to memory, and then your opponent gets to put that character from memory into any slot on stage at their encore stage. So there are
It's like
two ways to look at this card. The first one is as +1 soul. So you open up a lane and get to attack and get the soul and all of the benefits of a direct attack.
assuming you weren't
No
going to play that
counters.
climax in the first place.
Yeah, sure,
Yeah.
sure. I'm just talking strictly the merits of this card.
Sure.
So you get that direct attack, and then you get to get all the benefits of direct attack. Your opponent can't counter. You get the extra soul, and yeah, you get to up value a card like this, which probably wouldn't beat over many things. And second, and more,
you sometimes reduce the opponent's attack by a soul because maybe you would have had to crash that lane and give them a direct attack in return.
yay, damage economy. So the other more meta-specific effect is that any card such as Kotori level 3 from Rewrites, the Arisa level 3 from Bang Dream, the Kuro from Prisma Ilia, basically anything that reads give -2 soul to the character opposite or functional equivalents to that, lose that ability when they get sent to memory and get come back.
And any
they're
cards
just
that
not on
have
the field
markers
either.
would
Yes.
also lose their markers.
Mm-hmm.
Hinology.
So yes, that's Hinology, that other trance sets like this one. That's God. One of these days, someone is going to play this against the Phantom, and the Phantom player is going to lose their shit. As far as tech cards go, this is a very low cost card with a very high upside, in my opinion, because people love playing -2 soul stuff and similar.
My question is to the -2 soul stuff though. So against an Orisa, which is one of the better -2 soul plays. For this to actually be relevant, you'd have to start thinking about scenarios where you have 2 climaxes in your hand at level 2, because my question is, why aren't you just playing the Global Soul? If you play the Global Soul, that represents a 3 soul on the board. If you ditch the soul to this card, then you've removed -2 soul from the board, so you've gained net 1. Against -soul strategies, I have a hard time following why this card is better than just having played the climax in the first place.
Yeah, look, that's fair. If, for example, if it was exactly Arisa and there was only one Arisa, then they'd be able to split -1 soul to 2 of your characters. So if you get rid of that Arisa. Yeah, the more I think about it, the more you're right. I guess the main benefit is just not having to crash.
Against multiple Orisa, it might be the case that playing the Global Soul is. So if you ditch the climax to this Dr. Franxx effect, then you gain 1 soul off the direct attack, and you remove a -2 soul from the opponent's effect. So you get a +3 soul net, sort of. If you play the climax, then you get a +3 soul net. It's possible based on whatever kind of -soul shenanigans they've got going on, whether it's just -soul in one lane or distributed across multiple lanes or at their choice. It's possible that this has better impact on the board than just playing the Climax would have, especially if they can decline to use the minus soul effect at all. So I can follow that in some states that this is better, but if it's just against minus soul decks, it's almost I'm not on board. I think this card is crap. Like if that is all the consideration is.
Okay, fair enough. Still poses Hinologi. Other marker type sets.
Sure. Yes. Although when we talk about later cards, there's memory kick in the set, and you can get kind of big on offense at level 2. So it's possible that your answer to Hinologi lies in other cards in the set. So I'm not very high on this card. It's cool though. Oh,
Yeah,
also note it is off trait. So in order to get it, you'd have to use certain suite of cards because it's adult.
Yeah, fair enough. That is a pretty relevant point because most cards won't be able to get this. You'd have to salvage with Gate, use the 0-2 Brainstorm, or get it off Zoromir. Alright, next card is 9 Alpha, or whatever his name is.
9 Alpha? Yep.
Yeah, if this is on stage, it also has the name Mass-Produced Franxx, so this is part of a army deck. For each marker under this gains plus 1,500 power, and when placed from hand to stage, you may choose up to 2 mass-produced Franxx in your waiting room, put them face up under this as marker. So this is a 1/1 8k in that deck, and keep in mind you cannot marker this card because it's only mass-produced Franxx on stage, not in waiting room. Other than that, I don't think there's much else to say. I don't see a world where I want to ever play this. Because it means you have to play mass-produced Franxx, which is not a particularly compelling card. Even with the next card in this series, which is like... It's a really good meme, and it worked well in Puyo, but that's because Puyo had a bunch of other cards that stuff. Speaking of that card, this is Papa, I think, like, whatever. When this is placed on hand stage, you may mill 3. If there's at least one mass-produced Franxx in those cards, you may choose level 3 or lower character in your opponent's front row and kill it. So, very powerful
shenanigans.
Effect. Like, extremely powerful effect. It's, if you do build your deck properly, then this hits a vast majority of the time, and this effectively becomes a 2-soul beta into an empty row. So, despite having basically no power and despite costing stock, killing an opponent's field-based plan, like if you kill a Hinologi card or kill a Sunshine card, they can be slightly frustrated about that. So yeah, this is actually really potent effect. The only downside is you have to play a lot of this garbage, and the frustrating part is, unlike cards like the other support cards don't actually count as having the name Master Franxx in waiting room and the like, which I guess isn't a complaint of most army decks. Either way, army decks always have the downside of being pretty one-dimensional, and this one is no exception. But this card specifically is powerful enough that you should give it a second. Any thoughts, Mr. Pattywagon?
I actually solitaired this stupid deck. But I'll talk about my experience with that when we get 2 cards from now.
Okay. Next card is the Princess of Klaxosaurus. If this is in the front row center slot, it gains 4k power and is a bodyguard. So middle row, front row is 12k bodyguard. When the battle opponent is reversed, you may ditch a copy of this card to the waiting room. If you do, deal 1 damage to your opponent. This works on both turns. I don't know. You've got to play
Cool.
4 of this card.
It doesn't do anything else too, which is pretty. It's basically a vanilla 8k outside of like it being in center.
You get to put it in the center. It's 12k. You front and kill their thing and ditch something to burn 1. You don't necessarily rely on it burning on the opponent's turn, I suppose, but that's...
It is nice that unlike say Reinhardt, you can have other attackers alongside this. So the way that bodyguards were originally meant to be played. Um, I don't know. The fact that you need to play a bunch of it, and the fact that the actual effect is so low impact,
And you
and
need
the
to
lack of
find multiple copies of it just to get it.
the lack of anything like the events or I guess the decent events makes it
There,
pretty
there
hard to
is a
sell.
magical girl appears event in this set, so you have some tools to get a handful of it if you want to go for this plan.
Look, if it also had the text, you may have as many cards with the same name as this in your deck, then I'd be a bit more interested because playing 12 is a lot more than playing 4. But until that happens, let's move on to a card that actually has that text, and not a particularly interesting card. So, uh, mass-produced Franxx, you can have as many of this in your deck as you like. For each marker under this gains 1,500 power. When you place this from hand to stage, you may mill 3. And when this is placed from hand to stage, choose up to X copies of this card in your waiting room, put this face up under this as marked, where X is the number of this card in your front row.
This card does cool things. So the sequence, obviously, you play the first one to the front row, and then the second one to the front row, and the third to the front row, and then you push some of them back, and then you play 2 more. You mill a lot of cards, and you marker a lot of cards.
You don't push them. You don't push them back. You just play them in the background and move.
So you swap them after you're done.
Yeah.
And so you've got, I think there are 5Ks after that, and
it's the
you know,
red
you
Puyo
mill
play.
most of your deck. Most of them, a ton of your deck is now on your field as markers, so you actually get really good second deck compression. It's cool. Uh, I felt like I was playing a deck that actually seemed really good. Like had it achieves the second deck compression of decks that I would call
So
really
why doesn't this work though? It seems like the red Puyo game plan, but
Because they're freaking 5K. Like with Red Puyo, you need to play 3 copies of Red Puyo, and then you have 3 5/5s.
Yes.
With this, you need not only to hit a crap ton of these in your mill, you also need to play 5 from hand to 5. You need to play the 4th and 5th from hand will be 5Ks, and then one's going to be like, oh wait, no, it counts itself. So the 3rd, 4th, and 5th copies will be 5Ks, and then you'll have these 2 cards sitting in the back row being bad reservoirs of compression. And once your 5Ks die, you lose all of your compression, and you can no longer sustain it for 1-1. And additionally, you're never going to kill anyone. It's a 5K. And there's no built-in advantage in these cards natively. Like, I don't remember seeing a type card. We'll come to it if it does exist, but I do not remember seeing one. And therefore, it doesn't really do a great deal to sustain itself. And that's usually the clincher. Like, the sustain engine is what makes an army deck actually relevant. So, the green Chain Chronicle deck, the promo for the Railgun Misaka Imoto deck, and the
Puyo Brainstorm.
And the Puyo Brainstorm and the Rinne Brainstorm are all viable sources of advantage that make their army decks reasonable. Whereas in this deck, you are forced to rely on, I don't even know what you rely on. Like, you just play the 0-2 Brainstorm, because if you do, then you're sacrificing 1 5K and you lose your advantage first up. And additionally, if you think about the number of these cards that you have to mill in order to get that 5K field, which isn't even that impressive, mind you, it's a lot. So like, I'd estimate you need some like 20, 24, 25 copies of this in order to reliably get all of those milled into the grave and to have these be like somewhat big. I'm not on board. I understand how much people like free mill and how it makes them feel like they're playing the game well, and how funny it is to refresh on turn 2 with like 16 cards on the board, all of which are clean, and a hand that is clean, and you'll be like, I don't know, 8 in 22 on turn 2. but you don't have the sustainability to go forward. And I'm not convinced you can find that sustainability, not until you have a second set at least. Um, that's my take on it, because there is no advantage engine here.
Sure, the deck's bad, but
Just
Okay,
playing
the
regular
card
burrito.
as a card is pretty cool and maybe good.
yeah, I think the mill free and the mass mill free effect is really cool, but it's also like, entering the lottery and the grand prize is a punch in the face. So why are you entering this lottery?
It's kind of unfortunate because the Papa card is pretty good.
Yeah, the Papa card is really good. Like, I think it's actually really powerful.
Yeah.
Alright, next card is Hero, searching for a present. Funnily enough, that is precisely what he does. When you play it from hand to stage, you may discard a character card with Parasite or Franxx. If you do, search your deck for up to one present for you added to your hand. When this attacks, if you have one or few other characters, you may mill the top card of your deck. If it is a level 0 or lower character, put any back row. Card is fine. It is the worst type of plussing 0 in that it is not guaranteed, but it is also, it helps start your engine. And I think that in this deck, the present for you chain is actually an engine.
When viewed as a plus, this card is mediocre, and I wouldn't even think about the plus very much when evaluating the card. But this card is surprisingly good. This Hero Searcher, I think of the mill to maybe plus is just part of the overall card mill, but this effectively mills 4 cards. You search one out, that's 1 card. You attack, that's a 2nd card, and then if you eventually play that present event from hand, that's 2 more. So that's neat.
Well,
And
you
sometimes that
mill too, because you charge a stock and
okay, sure. So comparing this to another 0 that you would have attacked with that turn anyway.
Sure.
And sometimes that present gives you a better, a time relevant card, more relevant than the card you discarded. Some often it'll just give you a 0 back, but there are a lot of good 0s that you would probably want to have in your hand, even at level 1 when you play the event. So this exceeded my expectations as to this card. It got better and better as I played it. So I'm giving it a probably really high rating compared to what y'all would give of B+. Because it's a card that I always like seeing in my hand. And when deck building, I eventually got excited to put it in the deck when I got to play with the present package. And it always had relevance. So I think the plus represents that rating to me.
I think there's a lot of value in being able to search out a card like the 1/0, because the 1/0 translates into, well, anything in your graveyard with reasonable efficiency, making this into effectively a ditch searcher, which is totally reasonable.
I'm also high on the present package as a whole. We'll talk about some other another present related card later, in blue, that Tom referenced earlier, the Salvager. But this card can be played without the full. You don't have to go full present to play this card. You could just play a couple of the events. It'll perform a job of like a level 0 mill 4.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. Okay, next card is
A vanilla.
Yep. So the next card is a 3K vanilla. Yeah. What do you want me to say? Like, really, what could I possibly say about this card?
We could just move to the next card, which works with the vanilla. That's fun.
Alright. Do I really have to talk about this card?
Of course.
This card is played in other sets, so it's worth talking about why it might be played in those other sets and not this one.
We have very different definitions of worth talking about, I think. Alright, look, what can I say about this? You need to play a bad 0 to make this into a mediocre beater. Like, this is not Joker, I'm gonna say that much.
That's where we are going with this. Oh,
I don't know.
Sure. So
What did you want me to
there's
say about
P5 Jokers, which are 7Ks, and then there's the Prisma Ilya one that markers the frontal 500, and the frontal 500
it?
can draw
Key
phase
markers
change
are
it.
an
all
actual
right.
card with actual.
Yes.
Uh,
So in those sets, both halves of the card have function and even change into the better version of the card. So that's cool. For this, the 3K is dead weight.
Yep.
okay. Now that we've gotten that nonsense out of the way, we have more effective vanillas. I like that they've finally gotten this profile down to common. Well, that's not true. It's been common before, but yeah, no, this is not not a particularly impressive card.
It is just sort of big. And for sort of big cards to be relevant, you need back row that makes them even bigger while letting you scale into the mid game. That's the style of a lot of decks that play cards that are just sort of big. The back row here, like the brainstorms here that try to make them big, don't actually work that well. So this card doesn't have a place.
All right. Now this is the nines model. Up to once a turn, when you play an event, this gains 2k power. It is a 1/1/6k that becomes a 1/1/8k when you play an event. I can't remember how many counter events there are in this set. I know
Present
there's
for
one
you
yellow.
is a counter. Ooh.
Yes, there is a gloves in this set.
Yeah, that there is a green one. And I also believe there is a yellow counter event, but I somehow don't think that's going to be the one that comes to mind. I suppose we can. Oh, it's red. I suppose we can do that later. But long story short, this is a mediocre 1/1 that I'm not convinced I want to play ever. So I'm going to give it a D.
Mm-hmm.
Next card, 2/1 Zorome. It is a anti-stock bomb. This is always just a nice thing to have in your set. It is not an active draw to a set anymore because basically every set seems to have it.
Yeah, this
Gets
used to
rid
be
of-
good meta.
Yeah, back when maybe 3 sets total had it. And when the anti-early play buzz was the big, the big brain play. Not anymore. Right. Next card. Present for you. So we finally gotten here. This is a variant on Operation Tornado or Christmas event. I don't actually know what the custom event is called. Mill 2 cards, and then choose a level X or lower character in your waiting room and to your hand, where X is the sum of the level of cards milled. This is actually not a bad profile.
It
at
is.
the
Is
very
it
least.
slightly worse than Tornado? I think it's.
it's
I think it's actually.
very comparable.
Well, Mills one less.
Sure, it mills one less.
And you can't salvage a level 2 transfer unless you actually mill a level 2 transfer or the level 3. Whereas if this were Operation Tornado, you would very consistently be able to get a trans level 2.
That's true. Okay,
Yeah.
I think you guys have convinced me this is not nearly as good as Operation Tornado, but that card is like, as a baseline, assuming it has support, that card is excellent. From my perspective, this is only a C+. Like, this is a card that, if it did not have support, might not actually see play. Because for all your salvaging needs, you could very viably get it from, a brainstorm, or maybe get it with your combo if you're lucky, or a drop searcher even. But
It is to this card's benefit, though, but this set is very good level zeros.
yes, it has a lot of good level zeros, a lot of which are selected from only the top 3 or 4, but they are usually very efficient.
I agree with you. I probably wouldn't see play without the engine, but I respect the engine quite a bit. I think it facilitates some decks that would otherwise not work. So I give it a relatively high rating. It's a B to me.
Okay.
Okay.
Next card.
This is a cool card.
The final yellow card.
Yeah. Barricaded alone. So this 3/2 counter. Choose up to 2 of your characters. They gain 2 of your opponent's characters. Sorry. They gain 4 soul and the ability this cannot side it. Put this on the bottom of the deck.
Is this card good?
If you can play two of them, it is effectively playing two money counter in
Yeah.
for
Uh,
cheap.
so some
Hmm.
there's a lot of questions to ask about this card. There's questions of does this do anything? There's questions of does this just kill you? But uh,
I think
sometimes
assuming
they'll
that
just cancel anyway on the second card, in which case this did nothing in one of the lanes. But the fact that you can give it to two different lanes makes this even worth thinking about, I think.
like I said, the only way that I think this card is actually good is if you can two of them in one turn, at which point it is
Yes. It
effectively
becomes
double.
true anti-damage at that point. It's so close to true anti-damage at that point that you can just call it anti-damage in two lanes.
What I would ideally have happen is the opponent front attacks on one lane, you give 4 soul to other two characters, they can no longer side attack, so they can no longer. But I mean, if they can direct, then well, giving 4 soul is often enough to ensure a can play. And then when the next one front attacks your character, you can do it again. At which point you've probably gotten 2 instances of anti-damage. Now, this is also the sort of card you can't really fit draft. I learned that the hard way when I tried to play the Rewrite Yellow event, and that was just a awful experience keeping cards in hand. I just always wanted other effects instead. This is one of those instances where I want to play with this card before I actually say whether it's good or not. And this rating I'm about to give it is purely based on how powerful it can be, because this is actually a super powerful thing. I'm going to give it a B plus. As to whether people follow me in that is basically whether or not you. I think it's good enough. I think it's good enough of the time, even at 1, to warrant this rating. She just deleted it. But I can totally see if people think that this effect is not viable because it's not realistic to cast it.
Sure.
And that is honestly a big problem if you can't cast a card. If you can't, play the card, I mean.
And it obviously gets better if you win multiple lanes, because then you get more ability to play multiples of it, and you get to choose which lanes to get the minus soul, and you also get to get more information about whether to play it at all, because the obvious danger is that if for you to die, it would require you to be unlucky. Like, the opponent would have to line up a lot of damage and dodge your cancels. You actually make it more likely that they can kill you. By making more of their attacks independently able to kill you and find a pocket of non-climaxes. So getting more information, if you only have one copy of it, getting another additional attack worth of information to decide whether playing the Force Soul actually benefits you or would actually hurt you is relevant. My rating is also really high. I think if there's a route to this deck being good, it's through a path carved by this card. And I also really like how this fits into your stock economy. We haven't talked about Strelitzia yet, but on a Strelitzia burn plan, you're left with 1 extra stock at the end after everything, because Strelitzia burns on attack. So that fits pretty nicely into this card as a plan, because all you need is 1 extra floating stock main phase, and now you can play this event with the 1 stock generated in attack phase that you couldn't otherwise spend. So the 2 stock cost in this card, I think, is really important to let you leverage it in a game plan that actually tries to use a lot of your stock. So my rating is optimistic. It's A minus, because I think if this card isn't good, then I don't see how the set is overall is good. But I need to play with it more. I can't give it a very confident rating. You could call this a rating out of desperation.
Make it good, make it good, make it good. Yeah, I think I see where you're coming from, and I mostly agree. I think that if this card isn't good, then it's very hard for the set to be good, kind of like the no game, no life cards. That will, I mean, it'll come out at some point, but this card has a lot of power behind it. As to whether it's viable is a completely different question, so we'll have to see.
All right. That was all of the yellow cards for Darling the Franxx. We'll be back with some other color.
Green, I guess.
Green, I
Probably.
guess. Next time. See you
Green is
next time.
pretty